All right, so yesterday we tackled the Aztec Empire. Main focus today is going to be Inca, right? We're going to conquer the Inca today. Maybe it's a good place to start with what do you already know? Like I have up on the screen. What do you already know about the Inca? Between your ears already. What do you got, Jason?
All right. The Inca don't have a form of writing, and they use different chords to keep their records and history.
Chords, as in Chords, right? They are known as the Kipu, right? No written language. Okay, you learned that last year or in years past.
Doing the math, I was.
Oh, when you were doing the math. Okay, good. What else you got besides Jason? Inca Empire. You walk into class today, you already know. Riley, what you got?
Did they live in the mountains?
Okay, correct. South America, mountain range being Andes. Michael?
They have good road systems.
Outstanding road system. We think of all roads lead to Rome, right? The Romans, of course, had a great road system to move their legions, their military all over Europe and so on. The Persians, the royal road of Persia, they had an outstanding road system. But I agree with you 100%. The Inca road system, some of the remnants actually still left of that. All right, anybody else? You all are rattling off some of the hallmarks. True, I agree with you. All right, then let's get started. Why don't and there's the Riley mentioned the mountains of high up in the Andes Mountains. That's kind of an animated view of what symbol of the Inca civilization. It's like the signature. Like you think of the Eiffel Tower, you think Paris and the French. You see this and you think Inca. Right, Machu Picchu, right? Anyone been there? Because in second block, I actually had a student who has been to Machu Picchu and actually has relatives in Peru and so on. Okay. All right, so yesterday we tackled the Aztec. Today we're going to tackle the Inca. So now 1521, as you learned yesterday, as Cortez basically conquers the Aztec by that year, 1521, there were already rumors that another civilization, perhaps to the south somewhere, they weren't quite sure, somewhere to the south there was a wealthier civilization. Of course, we know that will be the Inca. But there were already rumors about that. Not to spoil it, but the Inca Empire, which was rich in precious metals and such, will be conquered by 1533. The game is over for the Inca by 1533. So, is that all that far, time-wise from the defeat of the Aztec? 1521, 1533, right? A decade or so, approximately. Okay, so no, both civilizations, these empires arise about the same time, about 1430. Both of them, around 1430, and they both collapse within about a decade of each other, 1521, 1533, okay? Let's go through the basics. Maybe we'll start off with some of the basics. Location, government, society, and so on. Let's start off with, just like we did with the Aztec, let's do that with the Inca, okay? Location, as you all already said, high up in the Andes Mountains, although with foothills as well. It's not like the entire civilization was high up in the Andes Mountains, but of South America, today's Peru, Ecuador, and so on. Government, they had a large empire, monarchy basically, right, with an emperor at the top, right? It's inherited power, right? So an empire with an emperor, monarchy basically, all right? Different than the big three, so it was Maya, Aztec, Inca. Which one is odd man out as far as politics goes? Aztec, did they have an empire, a monarchy with an emperor? Yes. Inca, yes. So odd man out was the Maya, because they had, each city-state had its own king or emperor, if you feel, right? Each one had its own monarch, okay? Their capital is Cusco, whereas the Aztec capital was Tenochtitlan, that we learned about yesterday. Cusco is the capital of the Inca Empire. Language is Quechua. But as you all said earlier, that you were right. There is no written language of the Inca, okay? Now, the language of the Aztec generally was sort of diverse, but they had, the main language was Nahuatl, right? Learned that yesterday. Quechua for the Inca. By the way, some people actually in the Andes Mountains today still speak this language. Not everyone speaks, Spanish necessarily. Quechua is the native language of some people, because it's not like 100% of the Inca have been wiped out. There are small populations of them. Economy, high altitude agriculture, whereas the Aztec is, agricultural, low-lying areas, the Valley of Mexico, high altitude, high up in the Andes Mountains, which kind of helped them because they could kind of freeze dry like potatoes and stuff like that and store their food and whatnot. So high altitude are the key words there to their agriculture, okay? And their people. Their dead could be preserved as well, which I'll show you here in a minute. High altitude agriculture. All right, religion, no different than the others. Polytheistic, they have a pantheon of deities, okay? But there's some similarities with them. The sun god, the rain god, and Quetzalcoatl and so on. Now the hallmarks of the Inca, you all already mentioned some of these. They had an incredible road system. I think Jason had mentioned the cords, the knotted cords. That's called the quipu, right? Which I'll show you here in a minute. Machu Picchu, of course, and their engineering skills. They, like other civilizations that we've learned about, they had great engineering skills, and they had some metals, but they could not forge. They didn't have high-strength metals that we know of. They had soft metals, It's kind of like the Egyptians. The Egyptians, it's not like they didn't use metal. They used copper mainly, copper spikes and stuff, which they went through constantly because copper's soft, and as they're building the pyramids and stuff in Egypt, those copper spikes that they're hammering into, they have to go through, I don't know, like several a day, because they're just wearing them out. It's just too soft. So they weren't really forging high-strength steel or metal like that. But they did have some metal tools. You can't say 100% that they did not, because they did, okay? But they didn't have the wheel, interestingly enough. That's kind of an interesting thing in ancient societies. It took them a while, actually, to develop the use of the wheel. And the Inca are no different in that. They did not have the wheel, no written language. Did the Aztec have a written language? Yes? And what form? Pictograph. Okay, good. You guys remember. All right, ready to move on? What do you got, Jason?
I was just going to say
Pictographic? Yeah, all right. So here, I'll have some pictures for you. No advanced metal tools, advanced metal tools. They had some metal tools, but they weren't very strong, right? They weren't forged. Or the wheel, and they were able to do this. Incredible. Look at the masonry style. Look at the masonry style. You see that, you should automatically, I can tell that immediately. That's Inca wall. Just because how unique they are. And the random pieces that they use, but they put them together like puzzles, But they didn't have any mortar. They had no metal tools. They didn't have what we have today. We can cut concrete very accurately with diamond-tipped saws and whatnot. They didn't have any of that. They didn't even have the wheel, and yet they were able to do this. Magnificent, right? And no mortar, no concrete between the cracks. But you still, to this day, you can't take a piece of paper and put the paper between the cracks. That's how tight the seals are, But without mortar. Incredible, right? I tried to put in some tourists so you can see just how massive some of these Inca masonry walls are, how big they are. How did they do it, with laser precision like that, By the way, that side of the world, you may have heard of, have you guys heard of the Ring of Fire? In science class, right? The plates, the convergent plates and everything. So they deal with a lot of earthquakes there, right? The Inca actually built their walls and their buildings, their structures that are earthquake proof. Notice the angle, right? This wall is not completely vertical. It's kind of set off at an angle. That way, when the earthquakes hit, it's not going to knock down their buildings and stuff. That's how advanced they are. Incredible, isn't it? Right? Earthquake proof. So their domain, as you all said earlier, is basically along the spine of the Andes Mountains in South America. Okay, that's the Inca domain, right? Massive mountains, as you can see, rugged mountains. Right? How are you going to farm that, by the way? That's going to be a little difficult, no? Terraces, right. Yeah, who said that? Terrace farming, Jason. Yeah, he's right. Just like the Chinese. The Chinese have to use terrace farming. You know, what other civilizations have to use terrace farming? You guys, well, maybe you don't know what terrace farming is. All right, I'll show you here in a minute. All right, but anyhow, there's from Ecuador through Peru and Chile. Right, this is your massive Inca Empire. This just kind of has a little list of some, 1430s, right? Some of the different Sapa Incas, the emperors. These are different emperors. Not that you need to know them or anything. I'm just pointing out to you. There's more than the one that I'll teach you about. Like I only have time to teach you about one emperor, and that's during the Spanish conquest, Atahualpa. So we're going to learn. He's the Montezuma of our story today. But yes, there were plenty of other. Inca emperors, or Sapa Incas, as we like to say. All right. So the Inca Empire was situated in the Andes, what's today Peru, Ecuador, Chile. Over time, they created, even though it's a massive empire, very efficient, very well-run empire. As you all mentioned, the road system earlier. Politically, they have an emperor, and that is, at the time of the Spanish conquest, Atahualpa. And so he's the Sapa Inca. By the way, he's the son of the sun, the S-O-N of the S-U-N. He is the offspring of the sun god, which is not Huitzilopochtli. That was the Aztec sun god. This is Inti. All right. And in the end, Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador, will have Atahualpa killed after he's arrested. Not to spoil the story for you too much, but it's not like the Inca people mourned all that much after he died, because he was a pretty feared emperor. He was feared. He was known for his cruelty. For example, how did he become the Sapa Inca? He became the Sapa Inca because he killed his brother. Kind of like Old Testament Cain and Abel, or the Roman story, Romulus and Remus. Romulus kills Remus to get soul power. Same thing. Atahualpa had his own brother killed so that he could have soul power. And then, like the legend is, he drank from the skull, his brother's skull, after he killed his own brother, so he could have soul power. So they didn't mourn too much once the Spanish killed him. But anyhow, he also kind of interesting character. He had, the reason I have the bat in the picture, he had a cape, Atahualpa, which I always thought was kind of interesting. He had a cape that was made from sewn together bat wings, which are kind of leathery. Bat wings are leathery. So they had his whole cape was made out of a collage of sewn together bat wings. Just kind of interesting. He's an interesting character in history. So we'll come back and talk about Atahualpa when we get to that part. Let's continue, though, for the time being with their culture, all right? Here you see kind of a high up in the Andes Mountains, the Inca culture. There is a symbol of their deity, their main god, out of the pantheon of gods, is Inti. Easy to remember. The sun god of the Inca, I-N-C-A, Inca, is I-N-T-I, Inti. Inti is the sun god. A little bit easier to say than the Aztec sun god, who they committed their human sacrifices and hearts after they take them from the human sacrifice to Huitzilopochtli. Huitzilopochtli is the sun god of the Aztec, right? Inti is the sun god of the Inca, okay? But there's a host of other gods. Mummies as well. We think of Egypt, we think of ancient Egypt, we think of mummification. The Inca mummified their dead too. And actually, at times would bring them out, kind of like the Egyptians would do periodically. Let's bring the family out and have a conversation with them, and seek advice and that sort of thing. And then put the family mummies back where they belong at the end of the day. That's called the Pinanca in Inca culture. The Pinanca, the court of the dead, right? You're consulting your dead ancestors. That is ancestral veneration. Yeah, a good example of it. Now, the Inca emperor, the Sapa Inca, and his wife, who co-rule, by the way. There is this idea of equality of the sexes. That's called gender parallelism. Listen to the name. Gender, meaning male and female. Parallelism. They are on an even keel, an even plane, right? They're equals. Because the Sapa Inca, the male emperor, is a descendant of the sun god, that being Inti. His father is Inti, right? And the queen, who is sometimes called the Mama Kia, is the daughter of the Koya, the moon god. Okay, the moon goddess, So the queen is descendant of the moon. Descendant of the sun, descendant of the moon. King and queen. They have equal spheres. They're co-rulers. What upsets gender parallelism in the New World? Well, European culture, because is it not male-dominated? I mean, we love the Greeks, don't we? But that's a boys' club, is it not? so that whole idea comes along with, European cultures, male-dominated societies and such, Okay? All right, so let's move on. What's kind of interesting about the Inca and their culture as well is like if we could use a satellite, like X-ray vision, and look about 6 feet into the ground and see all the dead people in the Inca Empire, what's interesting about it is they're all in the same position, fetal position, because, when you come out of your mother's womb as an infant, you're in the fetal position, and when you die, you go back in the ground, so to speak, Mother Earth, in the fetal position. Everyone looks the same in the ground. And by the way, everyone, if we could use that X-ray vision, everyone is facing the same direction when they're put in the ground when they're dead. Everyone is facing the same direction in the Inca Empire. They're all facing to the east to see every morning what coming up? Inti, the sun rising. So everyone deep in the ground is facing in the Inca, the same direction, which I always thought was kind of interesting. And they did perform human sacrifice as well, often with kids, like you see here. This is a 13-year-old girl who was sacrificed to one of the mountain gods and whatnot. Very well preserved. How is it that her body is almost like leathery? And look at the braids in her hair. You can still see that after hundreds of years. How is it that she is so well preserved?
Low oxygen levels.
Yeah, high altitude, right? Oxygen is what decays a lot of things. So low oxygen, right? That's helped preserve her. So she's like hundreds of years old, but it looks like maybe she passed away yesterday, So now she's sacrificed to the mountain gods. Now, what term that you've learned can help explain the purpose behind these sacrifices in ancient societies? She was sacrificed to the mountain gods. The people of what we consider today the state of Hawaii, the ancient peoples there, threw women and children into the volcanoes to the god Pele, as sacrifice to Pele. What is the term associated with all of this? Whether it's in Chile or Hawaii, doesn't matter where you are. There's a term associated with that. Being. Huh?
Animism?
Who said that? Jared, right. Jared's right. It's animism. No matter where you are in what society, it's animism, right? It's the same thing, okay? Like now this little girl, what's the purpose behind the trinkets? Like she was buried with some of her toys, as it looks like. This young girl. Did the Egyptians do that?
Yeah.
Yeah? On the other side of the world.
Maybe something for the afterlife.
Right. These are things you might need in the next life. In the afterlife, she's going to need these little trinkets and stuff. It's like Tutankhamun was buried with, little figurines that were his servants and his slaves, because he's soldiers as well, his guards. That way he'll have them, in the next world. So no different. Now some students ask, well, what did these kids endure? Is it like what the Aztec did? The Aztec, they committed sacrifices of children as well, as you learned about yesterday, in order to do what? In order for what to happen? To reign, right? The kids cry, the more tears, the better, right? You learned that yesterday. The children cry, they know that they're going to be sacrificed. The more tears, the better, because that'll be more rain that Tlaloc, the rain god, gives us, So more children are sacrificed when there's a drought. We desperately need the rain. We got to sacrifice some kids. They're going to cry. That's better, So they do this, but it's quite different. So that would have been extremely painful, as you can imagine, in Aztec society. Here, like these kids are sacrificed, but it's quite different. They say, many historians and archaeologists agree that there wasn't a lot of pain suffered by these kids who were sacrificed because they were so highly drugged. They basically were put in the ground so intoxicated that they didn't know which way was up, or anything. That's how drunk and intoxicated these kids were when they were sacrificed. So they may or may not have been. They definitely didn't feel as much pain as if you were in Aztec society, having your heart ripped out of you, So they didn't feel a heck of a lot of pain because they were so highly drugged. Now, in your opinion, I want you to think about this and maybe not answer right now, but think about it because we might come back to this. We're going to revisit the question. In your opinion, and so therefore you have to be able to back it up with your opinion, is it ever acceptable for one civilization to conquer another civilization? Is it ever acceptable? And actually our DBQ, it kind of revolves around this question that we're going to do. Not today, but probably start tomorrow, okay? Is it ever acceptable? Think about that. All right, now, beyond that, here's a question to ponder. How do you think the Spanish characterized the Aztec and the Inca? And then flip that around. How did the Aztec and Inca view the Spanish? What do you think about that? What do you think the Spanish thought about the Aztec and Inca? John, what you got?
They were just kind of like trash, I guess, and not smart.
Okay, inferior peoples. Michael?
I think they saw them as savages, and it was like their right to get rid of them or conquer them.
Okay, others? What do you think the Spanish thought about the Aztec and Inca? You all don't think that they were impressed by their societies, how advanced they were, and their engineering skills? Perhaps, but it may have been overshadowed by the sacrifices and the barbaric acts that they committed. No, they were impressed. They were impressed by Tenochtitlan and so on. But what the complex part of that is, how is it that you can have such an advanced society that commits such barbaric acts as sacrifice and putting kids in the ground and stuff? Yeah. How is it that they were able to do it? They didn't quite understand that part of it, Now, flip it around. What do you think the Aztec and Inca thought about the Spanish?
Gods.
That they initially, some did think, they would later drop that idea, but initially, yeah, they did think that they were gods. Like we talked about yesterday, when Cortez landed on the beaches, they thought he was, the legend is they thought he was Quetzalcoatl, right? The creator deity, yeah.
Imagine they saw them as like people who were only there to really conquer them and try to like change their ways.
Yeah, as invaders. Some Aztec and Inca saw them as simply as invaders who were going to upset our culture, which was, of course, partially true. In the end, that's basically what will happen, yeah. But were they impressed with the Spanish? And if so, what were they impressed about these Spaniards who arrived in their lands? Horses,
Metalworking.
their metalworking. What might they have been impressed by the Spaniards?
The boats.
Yeah, how they got there in the first place, Yeah, and of course, all the things that they brought along with them. Their weaponry was it more advanced than theirs? Yeah, they had, of course, forged metal and that sort of thing, whereas the Aztec and Inca really hadn't gotten that far, Okay, so yeah, they fear them in both cases. They're feared, but they're also, on both sides, they're impressed, right? Now, that's a pretty good map. It shows you the road system, right, connecting Santiago in the south to Quito in the north, and Cusco, the capital's kind of in the middle of the empire, right? But they have a great road system, like the Persians and like the Romans, okay? You have to, right? This is a massive empire, hundreds and hundreds of miles long, You've got to be able to connect the empire. It's kind of like the Roman Empire. You got to have a great road system, So it's not like you can pick up the 3D printer or the cell phone and start communicating and whatever, So that's how they're able to do it through their road system, okay? And they have runners. Like if I need to get a message from Santiago up to Cusco, how do I do that rather quickly? Use the runners. They have a relay, right? You might be the one who runs from Santiago to La Playa, right? And then another person picks up the message and carries it on to La Paz, and then on to Cusco. So there is a runner system, relay system, basically, of different runners. Not one guy has to do the entire thing, right? He'll go several miles and hand the message off to the next person, How do they maintain their roads? This is a massive road system. How are they going to keep it up? something you've already learned about. I'm always tapping into what you already learned or should have. Not bad. People, the Inca labor system known as the Mita system, right? You as an Inca citizen were supposed to give up, out of 12 months, a couple months of your time and labor working on the roads. That's how they maintain them. That is the Mita system. It's replaced by, of course, the Spanish encomienda, right? So the Mita system, they got 12,500 miles of roads to maintain. That's a lot. You've got to have a labor system in place. By the way, the roads were fairly well maintained because some of them are still around. You know, we still have some of the Inca roads. Do we still have Roman roads in Europe? Yeah, the Appian Way is still around. You know, the great Roman roads, Appian Way. Yeah, in fact, some of them are the world's dangerous. I think the most dangerous roads are down here. In fact, there's one that like several people die every year on because it's like a sheer cliff. If you go off the side of the road, it's high up in the Andes Mountains. It's just a sheer cliff. You know, you're going to drop hundreds and hundreds of feet to your death. You know, it's one wrong move. And of course, the roads are tiny, so you have these trucks trying to get by each other, and every now and then one goes off the edge, and that's it. You know, gonna meet your maker immediately. So they have a road system. How do you relay messages? With the runner system, they carry the quipu. How many have heard of the quipu? Okay, that it is a system of knotted strings, and we don't really understand it 100% today. I mean, generally, we get the idea, but you know, the different knots mean different things, and the different colors have different meanings. You know, but basically, it's mathematical. I mean, whatever it is, your message you're relaying is mathematical. It has to be, right? It's like a memory aid, right? How many have heard of Chinese abacus? You know, where you move the shells on the rack to one side. It's kind of like that. So you might use the quipu for population data, important dates, you know, the important things that need to be recorded, right? Because they don't have a written language. So this is how they relay messages. We don't have a written language that we understand anyhow. So the knotted strings kind of work like this, all right, on the quipu. If I need to relay the message of 132, you know, whatever it might be, you have 1 knot, 3 knots, 2 knots. 1, 3, 2, 132. 4 knots, 1 knot, 7 knots, that's 417, and on and on and on. So that's basically, it's a knotted chord system, as Jason had mentioned earlier, okay? And that's how they're able to relay messages and such, okay? Now, back to the high altitude farming, and they still have this, by the way. If you go up into the Andes, they still have these, you know, what we might call today like farmers markets and whatnot, you know, all kinds of crops that they're growing. Potatoes, carrots, you know, barley. They had like 200 varieties of potatoes. Like something insane, like 200 varieties of different kinds of like potatoes, right? So they still have these markets and stuff. There, if you didn't know what terrace farming is, there you go. Like, in what other way are you going to be able to farm land like this? Difficult terrain. So, like the Chinese and others, you know, you've got to cut into the hillsides in order to have fields that can be planted, you know. So that is called terrace farming, okay? There's no other way to do that. Oh, well, now what kind of crops, okay? Quinoa, I told you 200 varieties of potato, peanuts, cacao, and lots of protein, right? Squash, beans, peppers, peanuts, on and on and on. Coffee, thank you very much. Coffee always grows the best the best coffee comes from high altitude, like Ethiopia, China, high up in the mountains, or the Andes Mountains. Yeah, that's where you get some of your best coffee, right? There's cacao. Those are cacao pods growing off of a tree. And of course, that is what we used, as we learned yesterday, to make chocolate. You know, even though it's kind of gross looking inside, that's what we get, how we get chocolate. All right, now the llama is the largest draft animal in the New World prior to the arrival of Columbus and the Columbian Exchange, you know, and he has horses and cattle and so on. This is the largest domesticated animal in the New World, the llama, okay? It is the beast of burden of the New World prior to the arrival of Europeans, okay? And there it is, Machu Picchu. the signature of the Inca Empire, right? A lot of tourists go there today. It's my understanding there's several ways to get there because it is high up in the Andes. You can hike it. It's my understanding it takes about 4 days to hike up if you're into that. There's also a bus. I think it takes about, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, I think is what it is. You can take a tourist bus up there. But there's also a tram. I understand there's a tram system, you know, like cable car, right? It kind of goes up as well. You know. So there's a variety of ways how you can get up. What was it for? Like, what's the purpose of this place high up in the Andes, this Machu Picchu?
Worship God.
Worship? Others? Yeah, Lexi.
Not around enemies, like.
Oh, yeah. Sort of a getaway, right? It is sort of a hideout. Difficult. In fact, it's not even discovered until 1911. So that worked fairly well, didn't it? We didn't even know about it until 1911, or at least hadn't found it, or discovered it until 1911.
The Emperor's home.
What's that?
The Emperor's home.
It at times was a resort for royal families, yeah. So the answer is all the above. It isn't, Machu Picchu wasn't, we don't believe, created for one thing. It is a religious sanctuary. Yes, it is a citadel, a nice word for a fortress. Yes, it is a resort. It's all of those things combined in one, you know. So, now, why did they pick this particular site? Out of all the Andes Mountains, why this place? Here's why. I'll show you. I'll take off my glasses because it might be easier to visualize that way. Here's why they picked Machu Picchu. Why this particular site over others. Okay, you ready? If you follow the outline of my face and the face of Machu Picchu, you see it. Okay? My eyes and forehead, my nose, my mouth, and the chin. It's a face. It's a face in the mountains looking to heaven. Do you see that? Forehead, eyes, nose, mouth, chin. If I turn it to the side, you might see it easier. Okay? Forehead, eyes, nose, mouth, chin. Looking up to the heavens. That's why they chose that site. That's why it's unique. That's why they chose Machu Picchu. Okay? It is a face looking upward to the heavens. Okay. Now, of course, there's a lot of visitors that go there today. They marvel at the stonework, all done without metal tools, or at least strong metal tools. Okay. Not even discovered until 1911. That's the moment of discovery, by the way. Hiram Bingham is the explorer, Yale University professor, known, remembered for discovering Machu Picchu. That's the moment he actually notice how covered it is in vegetation. It's not like that today. It's very well manicured, you know, but at that time it was all completely covered in vegetation. You know, kids often don't get their due, their credit for discovering things in world history. You know, for example, 1922, the greatest discovery in the 20th century. Howard Carter discovers what? 1922. He had been there 10 years and he finally discovered. Correct. King Tutankhamun's tomb, right? 1922 was the greatest archaeological discovery up to that time. You know, but Carter, he had already been there 10 years, and he had a whole crew, archaeologists and people that he had simply hired as laborers looking for the tomb. He was getting pretty close, but where he thought the tomb was located in the Valley of the Kings. But actually, it's a kid. I don't know, he's about 10 or 11 years old. A kid actually is the one who first discovered it, because the kid found the top staircase that leads down into Tutankhamun's tomb. It was all completely covered with sand. He found that top stair. He uncovered it, and then he calls over, Mr. Carter, come quickly, I think I found something. And so he found the staircase. So all the credit goes to Howard Carter, and not that poor kid, who actually is really the one who made the discovery. You know. Another example, how many have heard of the Lascaux Cave in France? With the Hall of Bulls, right? You've learned about the Hall of Bulls probably when you learned about ancient world history part 1, you know. the cave art in Alaska, that was discovered by a group of young boys during World War II. I think it was 1944 in France. These boys were out with their dog, walking their dog, Robot, the dog. Robot got like off the leash, if you will. Robot like got away from the boys, these young boys, and ran off. They were all about 13 years old or so. And Robot ran into a cave in Lascaux. The boys trying to get their dog Robot back. The boys follow Robot into the cave and make the discovery of the Lascaux cave. They got very little credit for that, you know, but it was kids who actually found it. Same thing here, in a way. Hiram Bingham is with his whole entourage, you know, in Peru. They're on a trail in the jungle. They're, you know, in the middle of nowhere, basically. And out on the little dirt trail pops this little kid. I don't know, he's like 10 years old or something. And he tries to communicate with Bingham and his entourage, like, why are you here? What are you looking for? And basically, Hiram Bingham says to the kid, well, we're looking for the lost city of the Andes. Where's the lost city of the Andes? That's what we're searching for. And the kid says, oh, yeah, follow me. I'll show you. It's like, the kid takes them here. And that's when this picture was taken. This little kid actually showed Hiram Bingham the location of Machu Picchu. Yeah, and it's incredible. So, anyway, but that kid got zero credit for that. You know, it's like all the credit goes to Bingham. Anyhow, now Bingham's son, later in World War II, speaking of World War II, his son will save quite a few Jews from the Holocaust. So his son is sort of a hero in world history as well. Bingham's son saving many Jews from the Holocaust. Anyhow, there you have it. All right, let's go back to Inca society. They are performing brain surgery. I mean, they don't have the wheel, but they're performing brain surgery. Is that not interesting? Yeah. And these are some of the skulls to prove that. So basically, it would take a metal tool like this, again, soft, not really sharp, not all that sharp, and not all that hard, not forged. It's bronze and gold, which is pretty soft. But you could put a pretty decent edge on that, and that's how they would cut into the human skull. While the person's alive, by the way, as you see in this animated picture, basically what you have to do with this tool is move it back and forth like this in order to slowly, I mean, it's a time-consuming process, if you can imagine. Moving the tool back and forth like this, you can cut into the cranium, like you see there, and actually make a hole. And here, too, they could use the round ones as well and kind of screw into the skull. And you know, people survived this. Some did. You can't say all of them. Some actually survived. How do we know that? How do we know that some of them people survived? This is called trepanation, by the way. Trepanation in ancient societies. How do we know that they survived this? Because over time, what will this human bone do?
Heal.
It will sort of heal, yeah. And that's how we know people survived it. You know, they actually will heal. And I don't know about this poor guy. He had a lot of holes drilled into his head. I don't know if he survived it. But some people never made it through the... Now, they had anesthesia, some, which is basically intoxication. It's like, it's the only way you're going to get through that. But some people actually survive it. You might be asking yourself, okay, well, why would they do this? Why would they cut holes in people's skulls? Migraines, migraine headaches. How many have heard of epilepsy? You ever heard of epilepsy? The Inca didn't quite understand epilepsy, but the way they viewed what the problem was that if you have what we call today epilepsy, there's an evil spirit in your brain. There's an evil spirit in your head, and so to cut the hole, the evil spirit will escape. You got to cut a hole in the skull so the evil spirit will escape. That's how they understood epilepsy, why people have seizures and that sort of thing, you know. But actually, yeah, some people actually survived this trepanation. Now, we say trepanation, it's not only the Inca that did this, but there were other ancient societies that performed brain surgery. But the Inca actually were fairly good at it. We know that because some people survived, as I said, okay? Trepanation. They also modified the human body. They had the first, as I like to say, grill. The Inca had the first grill because they would drill into the teeth and insert precious gems and stones in their teeth, way before it was a popular thing to do in 2005 or whenever that started in popular culture. They were the first to do that. Look at the skulls. They inset precious gems in the front of their teeth before anybody else did that sort of thing. Yeah. The first grill in human history. They also shaped and manipulated the human skull to give it the elongated, cone head shape, we might say, to where people in Mesoamerica, kind of look like that. By taking the human skull and basically, kind of like they did, Chinese foot binding when a girl was about 5, 6, 7 years old, break her foot, wrap the toes underneath, and bind the foot. That gave a girl, the rest of her life, a very small foot, which Chinese men liked. How many have heard of Chinese foot binding? They manipulate the human body. Well, they're doing that here. They're manipulating the human skull to give it that elongated look, which they found appealing. Kind of like a small foot to Chinese men. So when can you do that in the human body? When is the skull soft enough to manipulate its shape? Infancy. As a child, just like Chinese foot binding in girls, breaking the foot, binding it, they would take planks of wood, and put them on the forehead and the back of the head of a child, and then bind it, and over time, the skull would get that elongated shape. So this is body modification, Great research paper topic is body modification. Like how and why have human societies tried to alter the human body? It could be tattooing, shaping skulls, Chinese foot binding. You could wrap it up on a number of things. But good research paper topic if you're interested in that sort of thing. All right, now let's move on to the conquest, the Spanish conquest. And yeah.
I think that the Egyptian did the head thing too. Head binding.
Egyptians do tattooing.
Head binding.
Foot binding?
Yeah.
A Chinese, Egyptian foot binding? Now, I don't know.
Head binding. Like the head modification.
The manipulation of the human skull. The Egyptians did they do that? I don't know. I've never heard that I can't say for sure one way or the other. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know they often cut off all their hair, and they were some of the first to use makeup, what we call kohl, K-O-H-L, around their eyes and stuff. But lice was a major problem back then, so many Egyptians wore wigs and stuff. But as far as manipulating the human body in other ways, I don't know. You have to look that one up. Who's our conquistador in the story?
Cortez.
No. He took care of the Aztec. He was done after that. He retired. That's why we come here every day. We already know the emperor. The Sapa Inca was Atahualpa. The conquistador is Francisco Pizarro. He is your Cortez of the story. The Spanish conquistador Pizarro, who was known for his cruelty. He could be very. And by the way, he's with all his brothers. I think there's 4 or 5 of them are on this expedition as well. It's not just Pizarro. He has some family involved. His brothers are involved in this expedition. Pizarro, he's illiterate. He cannot read or write. He's illiterate, okay, and known for his cruelty. And there's the, also known for his cruelty, is the Sapa Inca, the Inca emperor at the time, Atahualpa, who, as you know, I mentioned, already had killed his own brother so he could have soul power, okay? And that's obviously a movie screenshot of a pretty good movie about Atahualpa. But there he is being carried on his litter when the Catholic priests come into contact with him, which we'll get to that story here in a minute. The Sapa Inca, which means like the unique Inca, or the only real Inca, the ruling Inca, the ruling emperor, if you will. We say Sapa Inca, okay? The king, in other words. And he loved, like other ancient societies, hot springs. It's like the Romans, the Romans loved that. Do you know where that is, that picture I took? Because I've actually been there. It says a befitting name. That's Bath, England. B-A-T-H. Bath is the name of the town, England. That's wherever the Romans could find natural hot springs, they built a big bath. They love pleasure. It's like, and it is very. I've been there. It looks like a massive hot tub. It's very tantalizing. In fact, when I was there, they have little signs everywhere. Say, do not touch the water. It's like we're gonna tease you with this. It's beautiful, and you just want to get in your bathing suit and jump in because it's like steaming, like that. It's like you just want to get. It's like a hot tub, but you can't touch it. So when the tour guide turned the other way, I reached down and touched the water. I was like, oh man, it's like a hot tub. It was perfect. Well, they put out this idea that it's dangerous. Like there's dangerous, poisonous minerals. Don't touch it. It's like, yeah, right. I understand. I'm fine. Look at my hand, you know. So, but they don't like for you to touch it, you know. But anyhow, that's bad. But you find them in Virginia. How many have heard of Fauquier Springs Country Club? You guys have Fauquier Springs? That it originally was Fauquier White Sulphur Springs because it had natural mineral springs that people like to. It was kind of like medicinal, like therapeutic, to come and kind of bathe in the medicinal waters, especially in the tuberculosis era. People wanted to go out to the countryside and soak in medicinal waters, like at Fauquier Springs. There were several actually here in Fauquier County. This one is on the other side of the state. How many have heard of the Homestead? Beautiful place. If you ever get a chance, it's pricey, but beautiful. Homestead, natural, hot. In fact, it's called Hot Springs, Virginia. If you ever get a chance, go there. So we have several in Virginia, but that's the one in England that the Romans had back. This is Atahualpa's favorite. Atahualpa is like the Romans, emperors. He loved to try to find hot springs, and this is where he liked to hang out. This is Cajamarca. C-A-J-A, Caja, right? J is an H. Cajamarca, okay? And when he was going to meet, there was already, like Montezuma was going to meet with Cortez, right? There's a meeting that's established. Pizarro is going to meet up with Atahualpa. Where? Cajamarca. Because Atahualpa liked to hang out there, because that's where the hot springs were. So if he's going to meet this Spanish conquistador, Atahualpa said, I want to meet him at Cajamarca, because I'll be there anyway. So that's where they're arranged to meet on November the 16th, 1532. Atahualpa is going to meet Pizarro. Atahualpa makes a fatal error, and he doesn't prepare well enough. He has about 1,500 citizen soldiers, many of them unarmed. Bad idea, Atahualpa, because you're about to meet a very ruthless character, Francisco Pizarro, who was already well planned. Now, the town of Cajamarca, there it is, those who want to spell it, Cajamarca, looks like this. Here's your town square. It's a walled city, basically. In other words, not a lot of places to run and hide and get out, if you're attacked and ambushed, as Atahualpa will be ambushed. So what did Pizarro do? Pizarro was well prepared. He's got his cavalry, he's got his infantry, and he hides them. He hides them behind the buildings. He hides his cavalry and his soldiers, waiting for Atahualpa to show up for the meeting. Okay? He's just simply waiting. The problem Pizarro faced was Atahualpa was late. Several hours late. And his soldiers are getting antsy. Like, we're standing behind these buildings. Wait, where is this guy? He's not showing up. He's not going to show up. Can we go home now? And then finally, they saw in the background a massive cloud of dust, and they heard the drums beating. Finally, the guy shows up. Here comes Atahualpa, and he is being carried on his litter. Here he comes. He's actually showing up. He's late as all get out, but he's here. So he comes into the center of the town of Cajamarca, and now he's not ambushed immediately, right? He's got his 1,500 citizens, his entourage with him, and so, Pizarro doesn't walk up to him immediately or anything. In fact, he lets the Catholic priests go and try to speak with Atahualpa. So several Catholic priests walk up to Atahualpa, and here's where some of the miscommunication originates. Because the priests give Atahualpa on his litter, he hasn't been yanked off of it yet, they hand him a Bible, of course, because some of this has to do with conversion, right? They hand him a Bible and they say, this is the Word of God. And that's where some of the miscommunication comes in, because Atahualpa takes the Bible from the priest and says, okay, you're telling me this is the Word of God. So he waits for the Bible to speak. Because you said this is the Word of God, that means the book is going to talk to me. And obviously it doesn't. So then Atahualpa said, maybe I can't hear it. So Atahualpa puts the Bible to his ear. And maybe I just can't hear it. So he puts the Bible, he's waiting for the Bible to talk. You said this is the Word of God. And then it doesn't. And so he takes the Bible, and this is the crucial part. He takes the Bible and throws it in the dirt. Because you're lying to me. This is nonsense. And then he goes, and now you're going to listen to me. I have something to say. And that's when Pizarro gave the code word, the buzzword to attack, which was Santiago, Santiago, Santiago. And they come out from behind the buildings, the cavalry and infantry slashing their way through the crowds of the Inca. And like you see in this painting, here come Pizarro and all his men, killing as many Inca as possible. And they get to Atahualpa, who's up on his litter, and they grab him by the arms and yank him off of his litter. And they basically put him under arrest. Now what? Well, they take him to this room, which is actually still there, near Cajamarca. They take it, which is called the ransom room, appropriately, right? Which doesn't look like much, but they take Atahualpa inside, and Pizarro, Atahualpa's no dummy. He knows what they're after. Christianity and conversion is a part of it, but they're more interested in what?
Gold.
His gold and his treasures, and so this is when Atahualpa starts to bargain for his life. And he says, look, I know what you're after. You're after all the gold. Look, I can get it here. I can fill this room. He says, and that's why he's pointing to the ceiling. I can fill this room with all the gold from my empire. If you save my life, if you preserve my life, I'll fill the room. In fact, that's inside the ransom room, right? There's the line. And it's been a while since I had Spanish, but you can tell it says the red line marks the limit of the, I don't know what that word is, but it's context clues. It probably means like the red line marks the limit of the bargain or the ransom or something like that. I'm sure that's probably what it means. But anyhow, he said, I have a great road system. Our empire is a great road system. I can get all the gold from all over the empire, and I can get it here, and I can fill the room up if you save my life. So that's what he's pointing at. He's trying to save his own life. In the end, Pizarro fills the room. He made the promise he would fill the room with gold, and he made it happen because of the great road system that they had. He actually fills the room, and they killed Atahualpa anyway. Atahualpa did he meet his end of the deal? Did he meet the bargain? Yes. And Pizarro had him killed anyway. Now, Pizarro said basically, now you are a heretic, you're a non-Christian, a heretic, and now we all know in here what the death is for a heretic from the Protestant Reformation. What is the execution for a heretic? Burn at the stake, correct? So, but Pizarro says, look, you're a heretic, we're going to burn you at the stake, but I'll offer this to you. If you become a Christian on the spot, I won't burn you, but we'll strangle you to death. So Atahualpa converts, he becomes a Christian, and he strangled him. So Atahualpa dies by strangulation, not burning at the stake. But quite cruel. He did meet his end of the deal. He met his end of the bargain and was murdered anyhow for that. So by 1533, it's pretty much over at that point. Entrepreneurs in here might think, okay, yeah, that's quite sad. What about the gold? He filled the room with gold. That's a lot of gold statuary and whatnot. Like, how are we going to get that back to Europe? The answer is furnace. They're going to melt it down into ingots. So it can be transported and stacked rather easily. They're going to put all this in a furnace and melt down the gold and turn it into ingots, so they can carry it and transport it, How much? If you were Pizarro, you got 630 pounds of pure gold. 600, someone can do the math and look it up online later, how much that is. If you were one of the approximately 167 soldiers with Pizarro, you were one of the conquistadors, you got 45 pounds, each soldier got 45 pounds of gold. 45 pounds, every soldier got 45 pounds of gold. Now look, try not to be tardy or late to things in life. Like this guy, Diego de Almagro. There he is, and there's Pizarro. He was late in arriving, and he accused Pizarro, because he was late, in cheating him out of his fair share of the gold. So what happened? He felt cheated, so they went to war with each other. Now the Spanish are dealing with a civil war between Pizarro and Almagro. What happened in the end? They both were killed in that civil war. They both died. Are there consequences to greed? That's a great example of a consequence of greed, the Civil War. Now, was every bit of the Inca treasures melted down in the furnace? Did all of the gold end up in the furnace? No, not these 4 pieces. There's not much, but this is what we have. These Inca treasures did not make it into the furnace. I always thought the golden gloves were kind of cool. And who wouldn't want a golden weasel? That's kind of cool to own, But that beautiful necklace and stuff, these are 4 items that did not make it into the furnace. They were not melted down from the Inca treasure. Okay. Anyhow, moving on. I'm not going to go over this with you, but I plug it in for students who like charts and comparing stuff, like Inca farming. They used terrace farming. Aztec, how did the Aztec on Tenochtitlan, how did they do their farming? Floating gardens, yes, chinampas, right? So it's kind of like that. The Quipu system, that's the only kind of, they didn't really have a written language, but the Aztec did with their pictographs, So it's a kind of a chart that compares things like that, okay? If you like that sort of thing. I just plugged it in for you. Well, we already talked about gender parallelism. Let's do this really quickly. Now, this does not only deal with the Inca. You can apply this to the Aztec as well. They practice what we call gender parallelism, right? Equal sphere for men and women. We don't have a male-dominated society necessarily until the arrival of Christianity and the Europeans, okay? What's the same? What's parallel? The cults, the religious cults, there's cults for women and there's cults for men. So their religious ceremonies are equal in nature. What else? The hierarchies of female and male political officials, okay? Men were, yes, often at the top in political and religious life, but women actually did have a political voice. The Inca ruler, just the whole monarchy, right? The wife governed jointly with the emperor, the Sapa Inca, because both are descended from the sun and the moon. They are offspring of the sun and the moon. What's interesting, and ladies might like this, is that in Inca households, the men did the sweeping. The men did the sweep, like you see in that picture. The men swept the floors because it's kind of seen as something sacred, like the 4 corners of the universe, the 4 corners of the world, like a room. Like it was seen as something sacred, to be sweeping. So men often did that. Women's household tasks were not regarded as inferior. Like, I'm a man, I'm not going to sweep the house. That's not a part of their culture. Men and women have equal spheres. That's gender parallelism, okay? Burial sites, when men and women are buried in the ground, their burials are often equal. Not that the man, just because he's a man, gets a better burial or mummification or whatever it might be, okay? What declines? What is it that undermines gender parallelism? Well, as I said, the arrival of more European culture and Christianity kind of undermines this gender parallelism. But you might be surprised to learn that men and women acted on equal fronts, equal spheres in Aztec and Inca culture, okay? Here's kind of a nice chart as well for you. Time and location, government, religion, agriculture, their achievements, and what happened to them. They disappeared. What happened? I have the Maya here, even though I don't teach you a lot about the Maya because it's more 9th grade history. But in green, the Aztec and Inca, you could do kind of a comparison of the two. So if you like charts and that sort of thing, I plugged it in there for you. All right? All right, ready? What you got? Okay, good. Number 2. All right, good. Yes. Monarchy with a... Okay. Okay, good. 5. Yucatan, yeah. All right. Each city-state, whether it's Tikal or Chichen Itza, had its own king, not one emperor, right? All right. The Maya, number 7.
Calendar.
Okay. Yes. Solar. They were some of the best stargazers. If you take the top 3, Maya, Aztec, Inca, the Maya were very good stargazers. They were. I mean, they were only off by 6 seconds. Yeah. With their lunar eclipses. All right. Yes. And the Kipu. All right. And so on and so on. Yeah, there you go. You got it. If there's one thing that I'll do with the Maya that you may not have learned about the Maya, and I only do this, I'll teach it to you because it just is evidence of what great engineers they were. Chichen Itza, which is the Indian Mayan term for it, not chicken pizza. Chichen Itza, which the Spanish don't even call it Chichen Itza. They called it El Castillo, which means in English, the castle. Yeah, the castle. Indian term, Chichen Itza. There's a pyramid there, if you're wondering. Oh yeah, isn't that where all of the college students go on spring break? They go to Chichen Itza. Correct. Because twice a year, and only during the equinox, 2 days in the year, the Maya built the pyramid so that when the sun hits this corner, it casts a shadow on the staircase to where the god, kind of like Quetzalcoatl, but this is a serpent god. Kukulkan was the name. Kukulkan, the serpent, will return to the Mayan people by way of the top of the pyramid and then slither down the staircase. And so the Maya built the pyramid to where only 2 days a year this happens. That's why the place becomes one of the biggest cities in Latin America, and then the rest of the 363 days of the year, it's a ghost town. Like no one's there. But on 2 days of the year, the place is packed because everybody, including, yes, those drunk college students, are watching the sun hit the corner, cast a shadow over here, and as you see in the GIF, it looks like the Kukulkan snake god is slithering down the staircase. And then at the end, the head lights up. The sun lights up the head of Kukulkan at the bottom. That only happens 2 days out of the year. Does that take some pretty good engineering skills to do that? I'd say so. It's pretty good. Did you learn about that last year? The Maya? When you learned about the Maya? Incredible. Chichen Itza. All right. How many are familiar with John Green? He does a pretty good job with his little videos online called Crash Course. Crash Course because all of them are about 15 minutes or less. The problem is with many of his videos, he talks a bit too fast, I think. So you have to kind of go back and, what did he say with that? He's like, you kind of have to listen twice maybe. But anyhow, he does a pretty good video, which I plugged in the link for you, on the Aztec, the Inca, and the Spanish silver caravans. He does a pretty good job with that in 12 minutes or something like that. But anyhow, I plugged in the link if you want to watch that. It's actually pretty good. He does a good job with that. This is where you want to stop, though, for our unit. Why do I say that? Why do I put the big stop? Because if you go beyond that, you're getting into stuff that we learn about later, like Padre Hidalgo. I continue to teach you about Mexico, but we don't do this right now. We do it later when we get to that unit, okay? So for Unit 3, this is where you want to stop, all right? Questions? Issues? Any problems with anything? All right, our remaining time, please, did everyone get my college option? All right, let's work on our Empires map. This is your last chance. If you didn't finish your internet activities, you need to do that now and turn it in. Otherwise, if you already turned it in, please work on your Empires map. Have a great afternoon.